welcome to another edition of the occasional occasion that is the Datnexa Podcast. And as you know, we love to get people along who are doing something interesting, doing something innovative with AI across a range of different sectors, and really figuring out the ways that you get the most from this exciting new technology. Today, we're joined by Laura Moss from Parisi, who are a cutting-edge public affairs and public relations agency that have turned their back on the big legacy models of massive rooms of people doing quite repetitive, boring tasks for their clients' fees, and actually using AI to really squeeze the most out of the sorts of coverage, monitoring and aggregation that you can get to spot trends and kind of do wonderful things that doubtless she will describe far better than I am right now. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And I think it would just be amazing if you could just tell people what is Parisi Blue, which is the new AI tool that you've developed.
Yeah. So Parisi Blue is a powerful platform. It pulls in political data, media data, custom data, and looks at issues, topics, themes to show who's talking about a topic, where are they talking about it, how is that positioned, how is that influenced, how is that changing. But I think the important bit to add to that is it's part of what we call the Parisi stack. So, as you kind of alluded to, when we built the agency, we were kind of committed to using the best-in-class tools, whether that be for political monitoring or media monitoring. But we also saw there was a gap in the market. Yeah. And that's what we've built Parisi Blue to answer, that gap in the market, particularly around, providing insights for clients. Yeah. And alongside that, you get the Parisi kind of senior-led expertise to look at those insights, translate them, tell them what they mean to an individual or a company.
So I think there's something in that which is deeply pragmatic, that you've kind of gone, well, if the wheel's already there, we don't need to reinvent it. But actually, where are the gaps in what we do? And I think there was something, you were saying that really struck a nerve, which is a lot of media monitoring hasn't moved on since people sitting there with rulers doing column inches, right? Yeah. So to bring something in that gets that understanding, brings things together, I think is quite powerful. So what sorts of information, what sorts of data are you looking at within Parisi Blue that gives you these insights?
So, let's take the parliamentary data, for example. We're pulling in information from Parliament, information from government, and we're looking at, who's talking about that. Is it an MP? Is it someone in the House of Lords? Where are they talking about it? So are they talking about it in Prime Minister's questions times? Are they talking about in a committee room? And then what is really interesting is then what sits behind that. So just because it's the Prime Minister that stands up and says something may not mean that what they're talking about is so relevant for a client. It might be that something that happens, say in a committee room is much more relevant. So behind the platform, the front kind of interface, there's an algorithm, and other people who have built the tech, as you know, and within Parisi understand this much better. But there's an algorithm that kind of weighs up the relevance, the importance. So, to your point about measurement moving on, I mean, I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I did start with a ruler working out AVE, and sentiment was hugely crude, positive, negative, neutral. Oh, that's a bad article because the heading's negative. Yeah. What we've tried to do is say, well, wait a minute, the topic may be, not a positive one, but actually what's being said about said topic or said company within that topic is actually neutral or positive. So, and I think that's what's really interesting about the platform. And then when we take that data and analyse it, that's really where we can kind of add our expertise and advise people, well, actually, this means this and that means that, and this is what you should be doing.
So that sort of measurement piece, I think is really interesting, because before it was with the measuring the column inches, that's a human doing a complex job in quite a simple, imperfect way. And actually with this sort of technology, it's able to go in, really understand what it's saying, the intent of it, more nuance, I guess. Yeah. And then, but do that at scale at the same time. Yeah. I mean, I always like the sort of the idea of the Marks and Spencers and pants, which is kind of this idea of, it used to be in terms of social media monitoring and things like that. We kind of worked with tools and built tools before, where if it was just looking at keywords. So if you were to say Marks and Spencers are pants, that would be a very bad thing. But if you would say, I only ever buy my pants at Marks and Spencer's, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah,
and actually that sort of detail got lost before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. And as you said, there's kind of like an algorithm running and doing a lot of clever stuff. Could you just break down what the Parisi Score is? Because I think that's just such a clear way of understanding all of that in a quick number.
Yeah. So the Parisi Score looks at importance, relevance, the sentiment, and gives kind of tracks over time. So when we look at topics for people, we look at them over a set period of time. Yeah. And the Parisi Score will track how those things have moved over that set period of time, and will give you kind of one look at how an issue usually is kind of changing. So, for example, we did a dashboard recently looking at kind of, this debate around online and social media and on the back of adolescence, etc.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. I mean, obviously that has been in the zeitgeist for a while, but it was really interesting to look back and see how, after particularly adolescence appeared on TV, how the topic kind of got talked about, how the Parisi Score increased, where it made its way, a bit like the Mr. Bates, into Parliament, how that got certain people talking about it, and how it changed, kind of shifted the debate a bit from, this is happening, this is going on, to actually, what is going on here and how do we address that? And the Parisi Score will very much show and track that over time and show you how different things that happen. And that could also be, as simple as you put out a press release on a certain topic and you see how, when it hits, when it resonates with people, how that changes. Yeah,
that is. So it's, and I think kind of as a communications professional, the idea that you could look at how, like the impact of an issue or kind of like the coverage of an issue in the media and what's formed that coverage, kind of what it's composed of. And then you can see that filtering through to kind of the political.
That's really interesting for a lot of people, because a lot of, some people that we work with or do projects for are very kind of focused on that external media bit. Yeah. But when we say, well, wait a minute, you've got a set of stakeholders over here, look how it's impacted or being discussed or is relevant here in the kind of government piece, that's often new to them. I also think from a very practical point of view, I mean, we work with a lot of advanced manufacturing companies, deep tech companies, and we were tracking that as a topic for a while for a couple of clients. And a company within their world basically, crashed, folded. And we looked at how the media spiked. And from that, we kind of built out some ideas for thought leadership topics around, why did this happen to this company? What happened. We don't want to talk about that, but we want to talk about some themes that came out of it, and got some really good podcasts and thought leadership placements for a client by looking at that and thinking, wait a minute, the media at the moment are there focused on, is this a bubble? Is there hype? What is the hype? Where do we go from here? Let's jump on that. So it also helps in a very practical way to provide not just insights about where is a particular policy going, where has this hit, but also, wait a minute, that's happened. How can we use it? Yeah,
it is. And I think that there is something, I mean, in the past couple of months alone, it seems that within UK Parliament, a lot of the select committees are all of a sudden asking for or open to evidence from non-traditional players, if you will. So, like Datnexa is a startup that looks at emerging tech in public service. We're submitting evidence to the Public Accounts Committee around the National Frailty Index because we think, there's data that could help their piece. I think if you're a public affairs professional, there's really a sort of a place where you look at policy into practice and how it's going to affect your industry. with this, it seems you're able to spot the gaps where you can do from practice into policy and kind of get in there beforehand, especially if you've made the weather with media kind of, or the press piece running into it.
Yeah. And I also, think that we spot the gaps and, as you said, the platform is very good at doing, a lot of the work at scale. Yeah. But the added element is, we have been doing this for a while, understanding the topics, sometimes knowing the people involved and being able to say, well, wait a minute, this person is talking about it because, we often find that, because they've got, data centres, for example, another area we work in, MPs being very negative, very positive. Oh, look, they've got a data centre being built or in their constituency. So it's also, so the platform does, a lot of things at scale. It provides that forward-looking insights. And then we layer on top of that, well, wait a minute, that's because of X, Y, Z, those expertise, bring that together.
So it kind of, it plays well in terms of that entire stack. And also I think in terms of AI, especially for an industry, dare I say, I've worked in quite a few press offices where, we had pages until like 5 years ago and stuff like that. So there are bits within our industry that can be a little bit more backward facing. So it's actually that what this does is it brings it in and really makes it relevant to a whole suite of activities that at the moment are not getting the benefit of technology, and it's not letting the AI kind of run off and do its own thing as well.
No, you have to,
It's really,
of course, you have to have the human element of top, but I really do believe with this, if you're going to sit in front of the client and advise them on what you're seeing, you have to have the human element on top.
I think it's unique, and also there's the thing of like how many, if you're not using technology like this as an agency, you are using humans to do it, which is really expensive, which is just like zero value for the client. It's like this emphasises the human piece of it. So I think it's a nice...
Yeah. And also the ability, as you say, you've got to use AI in the right way, but this gives us more time. If we were using humans, some of what the platform does would take days. Yeah. So what are we doing with that time? Well, that's where we can spend more time. Okay, what's the strategy? What does this mean? How do we practically kind of put that into what we're going to advise? How do we practically do that work for the client? We can put more time into that and less time into the kind of turning the pages and trawling through the data. Yeah,
absolutely. There's proper value add in there.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned we a few times, and I just wondered, could you just tell us, like, who is Parisi, and most importantly, what led to you creating Parisi Blue?
So, as you said in kind of the intro, we are a communications consultancy, working, in a number of sectors, largely kind of deep tech, advanced manufacturing, defence, digital infrastructure, AI. And, we were founded 2 years ago, and we kind of, offer clients three things, helping you grow, realise your commercial objectives, help you to unlock funding, and then also, given everything we've just talked about, unlocking kind of sticky policy or helping clients through difficult policy situations. We, and myself and my colleague, Nick Connor, so we're really a senior-led, communications consultancy. And when we founded, we decided what we wanted to do was bring in other senior people to work alongside us, but in like a collective model. So we work on projects, we work on clients, and as needed, we bring in. So whether that be a behavioural scientist, a product marketing person, a brand strategist. So when you're working with us, you get senior people on your accounts the whole time, and you get senior people with the relevant expertise for what you might need within that moment. When we started, we had this commitment. So Nick and I had been talking about, something in the guise of Parisi Blue before we even founded the agency. He, many years ago, had built an Excel spreadsheet, which did some of the things that Parisi Blue now does, but obviously manually because we're going back. So it kind of been a seed of an idea. But until we had our own agency and our own kind of money to throw at it or not throw at it, we didn't really have the movement to do it. And so when we founded the agency a year in, we decided, we'd seen this gap in the market. We talked about it before and we thought, you know what, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's offer something. But not only the gap in the market, I think now, having been doing this job for many years, as an agency, there's lots of agencies obviously doing the communications piece, etc. But you've got to be offering something. And often that is kind of product, whether that's a SaaS product, whether that's a product like Parisi Blue. So there was also a kind of commercial kind of nugget in our mind in, okay, we do great work for clients, but how do we kind of elevate that, offer something else going forward?
So in that sort of journey and kind of making Parisi Blue a real thing from I love that sort of the piece of the Excel spreadsheet to something all singing, all dancing. I mean, are there any lessons that you've learned along the way? Anything that you kind of feel you would tell people, kind of like learn from my mistakes and go and make your own ones? What have been the kind of the milestones?
I think so. First of all, from idea to reality, just having the balls to have an idea and think we're just going to do it.
Yeah.
It may work, it may not work, but let's just do it and see what happens. I think partnering with people, and I'm not just saying this because Datnexa are the people behind our development, but partnering with people that understand your world. It was important for us that, there's many great software developers out there, but the fact that, you and the team understood communications, understood politics was important because it meant we weren't talking across, hairs or to each other. We understood what was going on. Challenges, delays, glitches are inevitable. It's a real lesson in patience and not just like, why can't this do this now? Which is always great when the non-tech person says that to the tech person. Why can't it do this? So just being patient. I think the biggest learning for me when I get asked this, number 4, is don't let perfection slow you down. So, I come from a world where every day you're working with clients, you want to do the best work for clients, you want to do work that's of the highest standard, and then you go and build something like this, and you have to just, as I said, you have to take a leap, but you have to be ready to put it out there before it's perfect, to test it, to run it, to get the constructive criticism. And I think, kind of turning it on as it was, letting people try it, starting to use it was probably the biggest leap, because it's like, well, that's not quite right and that's not quite right. Yeah. But actually, it's also been the biggest learning, because a lot of the feedback has meant we've tweaked things as we've gone. And also just always remembering, sticking to why you're here, what you're trying to do. You can get very bogged down in should we add this and should we make it do that and etc. But having a plan and thinking, right, stage 1, this is what it's going to do. And then once we've got that, we can look at stage 2, but sticking very much to the kind of mission of what you want to get done to begin with and staying on track.
It is interesting. That's one of the lessons we learnt really early on with developing AI or emerging tech, or kind of like the data science stuff as well, is that you need to get it into people's hands and get them using it. And it's kind of, but it's whilst we have engineers, a lot of it comes down to these tools that are very probability based, and that means you need to kind of build it and then tinker with it for quite a long time. So it is odd. I mean, like the project before this that we kind of made that kind of learning on, we had the first version ready, and I think it was 2 weeks. And everyone being used to like these big IT projects was like, surely it'll take months. And we're like, no. I mean, it'll take months to get to the end point, but you'll have something in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to work on it. Yeah. But I think you're right. It does kind of keep it, it keeps it so relevant and so, like fit for purpose. And it kind of, it's that ethos kind of runs through the entire delivery, I think, as well.
No, I was just going to say, the only other thing to add to that is, we set out to build one thing, and we have built that, and we've stuck to the mission, but we've also had to, tweak the offering as well. So I think it's also being able to flex and bend and step back and think, okay, well, this resonates with people, that doesn't resonate with people. Yeah. How do we change that? And not to be kind of disheartened that perhaps this like glorious vision you had on day 1 isn't exactly what you get on kind of day 101. but that, you're still working towards something, you've still got a product, you're still using it.
Yeah.
And just to kind of keep motoring forward, I think.
In terms of the offering, I think it's a really interesting lens to kind of almost review what we were talking about earlier. The product itself. So you've kind of got this AI heart of Parisi Blue that's able to go out, kind of absorb and then process a ton of information, more so than, kind of any you'd need a team of people to literally do the same thing. So it's looking across UK parliaments, which includes the devolved assemblies. It can look at committees, it can look at Westminster Hall, it can look at the main chamber, it's looking at the Lords, Senate, Holyrood, and in theory it could start looking at other elements if there's a feed there to kind of pick it up. It's also looking across effectively, kind of what a large media monitoring service would do. And again, that's global if it wishes to be. And then you can also import your own data. So you could put your stock price in, you could put your campaign activities in and everything like that. The initial vision was that it was something that potentially people could kind of log into maybe, or it could be a service. But I think over the course of time, it honed more into the service piece. I think with that model, and then looking at the other things that you've kind of put together, do you see there being something which is, kind of a specialist, a specialism at kind of like understanding data in terms of public affairs and public relations and how it all fits together, and then making that part of the offer? Or is that part of the offer, is that not? That wasn't a great question, was it? I started it and I just started talking
But you did a really good sum up of what Parisi Blue is. That's great.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
that was my I kind of got lost on that tangent.
No, but I think part of what you're talking about has always been part of our offer.
Yeah.
We've always had monitoring tools which has allowed us to look at some of that. We still use some of those monitoring tools because there's certain things that they do that Parisi Blue was never set up to do and won't do. And that, going back to kind of our initial, conversation right at the beginning of this podcast, that's all part of the Parisi stack, best in class tools, the senior expertise, and then Parisi Blue. I think what it has done as we start to use it, in more situations, give you a case in point. We were asked to do a horizon scan the other day on AI and sovereignty, particularly for someone that wanted a public affairs programme around this. And what we're able to do is add on an extra layer of insight with Parisi Blue. So, we were able to kind of use it to say, this is how this topic has evolved over the past 6 months. This is where it's evolved. This is how it's been talked about in the media and in Parliament and government as well. This is how and then provide them with forward-looking insights. I mean, the big one is, okay, but how would a Burnham, opens today, doesn't it? I can pretty much Burnham government gonna change that. So I think we've always done that, but I think it adds an extra layer of kind of insight, an extra layer of knowledge, and an extra layer of forward-looking kind of, this is what we can see, this is how it's evolving, this is what you need to be doing, this is why you need to be engaging with X, Y, and Z, and this is how you need to be engaging.
And again, that kind of brings back the importance of the human.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of what it is that you bring as a practitioner that, the tools just can't in that level of kind of like
absolutely,
comprehension.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of case studies that you think?
So I mentioned the one earlier, watching this company kind of unfortunately collapse, and then how we thought, okay, what does that mean for the company we work for, and how can we kind of use that to talk about some of the issues? I mean, last night Nick was at an event and they were presenting a report about Sheffield economy manufacturing cluster, and we built some Parisi Blue insights to kind of sit alongside that, to kind of elevate what they were also doing. And so in that sense, it's also helping people to kind of, this is our report, this is what we're seeing in the economy. How is that playing out? Is that what's been talking about in government? Is that what's been talking about in the media? How do we marry the two and bring them both together? So, another layer of insight, another layer of understanding. In this particular case, very much married up to what their report was saying about, the Sheffield cluster being an absolute asset, part of the industrial strategy. But then, for some of the businesses there, it's like, okay, this is really interesting. Now, how do we kind of use those insights alongside our report to make hay while the sun is shining, literally on Sheffield and on this sector?
That is, and it's something that kind of it's a level of insight that just wouldn't have been there before as well. So it's kind of
maybe it identified people. Some people were saying, "Oh, we wouldn't have thought of talking to that person," or "We wouldn't have thought that would have been picked up there." Or it's really interesting that that's the part of the cluster manufacturing sector here that people are talking about because we would have thought it might have been this.
Yeah.
So it adds some of that kind of level, as you say, that wouldn't have necessarily been there previously.
Also, have you found challenges in trying to, because this is so new, and often when you're talking to people who are really innovating, it can be a challenge sometimes to communicate what you're doing because it is so new and it takes a while for people to get their heads around it and see it. And often it's by showing them, not telling them, that you kind of get this sort of impact. What tips or what advice would you give to other people who may be in the position of they're about to innovate on something, they're about to do it, like now you're through to that other side of it, or you're getting to the other side of it? What lessons have you learned about that?
I think one I go back to before is about this whole, when you've got people that are very kind of into the tech, it's brilliant because obviously the tech needs to work for the whole thing to work. But being able to have that ambition, but not lose sight of, well, we have to get this out there and we have to start commercializing it and we have to start kind of just using it. I think also not being afraid to just try it, do it, see what happens, and also not being afraid to slightly pivot and think about, okay, it hasn't, we're not maybe using it in exactly the way we thought of to begin with, but how can we use it and how can it kind of add benefits to our business? So it's certainly what we've done, and actually we've seen absolutely the benefits in doing that and being able to kind of pivot and think about it differently. Yeah,
and also I've noticed I quite like the video explainers and kind of like the visual posts and stuff that go up on LinkedIn with like you may have seen this issue. Actually, here's what's going on under the radar.
I mean, I think be unashamedly pushy. Just keep putting it out there. Keep talking to people about it. Keep getting Nick to do nice explainer videos. Every week I set him off on a mission to produce another couple of dashboards. Don't be afraid. We've had some real constructive criticism. And it can knock you for the 5 minutes after you have that call with someone. Yeah. But then you pick yourself up and you think, right, no, this is not blindly moving forward. You take it on, you think about it, you talk about it, but keep having the conversations, keep pushing it out there and keep being bold about what you're trying to do and, use it. We found the more we use it, the more we bring it into how we're working with clients. New business, we used it on new business opportunity. It was one of the key, even though this particular client wants much more traditional monitoring to start with, it was actually one of the key talking points within the pitch because they're thinking, okay, well, how can we use this later down the line? Yeah. So, we've seen lots of different avenues for it and you've just got to keep being bold about,
putting it out there. I think that's a really interesting point about people wanting to talk about it and wanting to understand it. And I think there's a real appetite for a sort of a sense of where the industry is going to go from people within it, without there being, I think a lot of what we've seen from the established suppliers is that thing of, was it Henry Ford, who's like, if I asked people what they want, they would have just said a faster horse. And I think a lot of the PR and PA tools that we've seen are just faster horses, whereas this feels like a step change. The interesting bit would be working out how do people have to change? Do you think there's a change in practice coming that, like in the way that all of a sudden we move from writing press releases that had to follow a very specific format to knocking that down to 140 characters to fit into a tweet? Is there a similar step change coming, do you think, or will it just kind of roll over?
I mean, I think in some respects, because, certainly when we talk to kind of CMOs, those people that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, what they're being asked for from the C-suite is changing. No, and also what they're pushing towards the C-suite, those times of monthly activity reports, in many places are kind of dying a death now. Yeah. And it's much more about risk and reputation. And I think there definitely is more, we get more requests now saying, well, what does this mean? What's the risk here? Yeah. What does this mean for our reputation? I definitely think as people become more switched on to what is happening in government as well, and realising the knock-on effect for us that can be both here in the UK and in Europe, especially around kind of the digital sovereignty AI piece. I think there is that change. Don't get me wrong, there's always been crisis teams and people doing risk stuff, but we do have a lot more of those conversations like, how does this affect my business? What should I be doing? How should I be engaging with a much wider audience set? Yeah. So will it suddenly be, I think things like, this whole chat, which I'm not going to get into now, AI writing press releases. Yeah. I think that's a different conversation. I think we're moving more towards there. Whether there'll be like a great switch over, I don't think so. But I do think people are thinking much more about that piece. And, sometimes, and now much more, given the way the world is, the economy is, etc. Just, sometimes we'll do that piece for someone. They'll have in-house teams who can then execute it, which is, great by us, but they want that kind of outside knowledge help with that piece. And we are seeing more of that. So I do think there'll be a gradual movement, into that, definitely. Into
that space. I think just to use another automotive metaphor, I think a lot of the stuff around using AI to rewrite a press release or something like that is closer to a sat-nav, if you will. Whereas this is closer to an electric car. Yeah. It's like, it is in the same sort of ballpark. However, it's a more fundamental shift across.
Yeah. And also, can I just, because we work with, in professional services as well, with law firms particularly. And actually, we are, yes, a lot of the time we are having these conversations direct with heads of comms, chief marketing officers. But also in some of those law firms and, some of the issues they're working on, particularly, again, in AI, etc., the lawyers are directly saying we need to engage with government or, the rules around X, Y and Z are going to have an impact. And therefore, it's not necessarily always their marketing team that's saying to us, we need to look at the risks. There is a bit of that management, dare I say it, management consultancy piece where, we're able to talk to a different subset of people as well. Yeah.
Well, it brings that thing of, all of a sudden the whole thing with like vibe coding, right? So it used to be you had to be a developer, you had to have the syntax, you had to know this other language, you had to, have that experience of it. And all of a sudden you can now just describe it conversationally and you've got something that's a bit of code. Like how good that code is for someone who hasn't got the experience of writing code, now that's another kind of conversation. But it gives you that first run through. I think this has a parallel to that in that if you were sat there and a lawyer and you go, actually, I think the next big issue is going to be, the recall of a particular component in a transformer, but I'm not sure if that's a thing or not a thing. If you were to have previously had to run it up via like a CMO or a head of comms who was then going to take it to an agency, the cost and effort of that would have been prohibitive. Whereas now, that idea of getting a dashboard on a kind of a set of queries and understanding how it all fits together can be done so quickly. That barrier drops. And actually, you kind of think if you were a CMO or you were kind of looking at professional services, you'd think you could actually unleash a whole load of not just client value, but like upsell, resell. You could really do some cool stuff with that. I think it's an exciting time to kind of figure out how you can engage with it and get more out of it. And there has to be someone out there who wants to do that. So you need to just drop us a message below on whatever you're watching this on, and then we will do that. I think that sounds cool.
Definitely.
Just to step away from the product, the tool, the company and everything else, just to kind of talk about your experiences through this. I know you do a lot of work within the Women for Tech space. So you're very passionate about women in AI and kind of understanding that world and supporting others. From that perspective, is there anything that you've kind of found or learned along the way that kind of you'd like to discuss?
I think that, sometimes when I go into rooms, where it is about AI, it's still the age-old thing. Yeah. There's fewer women in there, although it's, it is becoming more and more. I don't think it's that different to what I talked about before in being bold, not letting the fact that you might be one of few women in a room talking about this topic put you off. For me, and I'm not saying, there are lots of women out there doing the coding, the techie, etc. For me, personally, I was hesitant at the start because I was like, well, I don't understand the algorithm behind it. And, when I was talking to Jake in your team and he was saying things, and I'm like, Adam, can you please translate for me? It can sometimes be a bit nerve-wracking, but actually, I realised that my role in kind of selling this and talking about it, I didn't need to understand everything else. And I don't think that necessarily matters, man or woman, actually. But I didn't need to understand all of that. I just needed to understand kind of why we're doing it, what we're doing, and what the benefits are for those that want to use it. I think the other thing is that, because it is perhaps a more male-dominated area, not being afraid to just, if you're interested, just try it. Just leap in, just take that risk, just this is where the world's going. And actually, back to that technical point, you don't have to understand everything that's going on behind it, but you need to be part of this if you're going to move forward. So, try it, see.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks all for tuning in. That's Laura Moss from Parisi, and you can find more details in the text below. Please leave a comment and let us know if you'd like anything more. Laura, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Cool.